Welcome to the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculties podcast.
Welcome to the second series of the NONPF podcast, created by the Simulation Committee of NONPF. This year, our podcast series, titled In the Trenches, Confessions and Pearls of NP Simulationists, will center around the 2023 fall release of the NONPF Guide to Nurse Practitioner Simulations, a step-by-step approach. This guide, an e-learning book, was created by the NONPF Simulation Committee. The eBook is formatted to help NP faculty design effective, measurable simulations that address learner programmatic and national level competencies. Led by members of the current Simulation Committee, podcast moderators invite authors of the eBook to share pearls of approaching simulation from the perspective of the nurse practitioner. Hello and welcome to the first in our second year of our podcast series. This is the NONPF Simulation Committee podcast series, and we are really excited this year to focus on the recently produced NONPF 2023 Guide to Developing Simulations, a Practical Step-by-Step. This is an ebook that was produced by the NONPF Simulation Committee, and I am excited to welcome two of our active members to that committee today. But first, I'd like to introduce myself and my co-moderator, Jeannie Rodriquez. So I'm Jeannie O'Rourke. I'm an associate professor at Loyola University in Chicago, and I'm a proud member of the NONPF Simulation Committee since its inception in 2019. Jeannie?
Hi, Jenny. Thanks. I'm Jeannie Rodriquez. I'm an associate professor at Emory University in Atlanta. I'm also a member of the simulation committee as well, and happy to be a part of that.
Thank you. And then our two guest speakers today, welcome Dr. Brennan and Dr. Nye. Could you please start by introducing yourselves?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jenny and Jeannie. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Mary Brennan, and I am the director of the Adult Gerontology Acute Care Nurse Practitioner Program at New York University, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the NONPF Simulation Committee.
And hi, I'm Dr. Carla Nye. I'm a clinical professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. I have been involved in simulation for many years and have done a bit of research, and I'm a former master's program director. So from the nurse practitioner side, simulation is really important. So really excited that we're doing this today.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be able to introduce this ebook and share kind of the exciting components of it and how maybe it can be used in your simulation practice. So let's start by just talking a little bit about the impetus for starting this book. You know, why was it needed? What was the simulation community asking for that maybe wasn't currently available? So how do we as a group get started?
Well, thank you for the question, Jenny. And as the co-chair of the Simulation Committee, we have several charges. And a couple of those charges are to develop and implement a plan for enhancing existing or new programs that are responsive to member feedback and address current and prospective member needs and their specific simulation needs, and to identify best practices and faculty resources for simulation, to collaborate with partners to build the evidence on the use of simulation in NP education, and to promote our recently published simulation e-manual. Historically, the committee has been very, very productive and reaching out and trying to satisfy the needs of our faculty members. And yes, we've had a lot of achievements over the last several years.
I love that you said that, Mary, about the achievements, because this committee has been really active. When we started in 2019, I mean, there really wasn't much out there in relation to nurse practitioner simulation. There were not many research studies done. A huge amount of the work has been done in the undergraduate world. And we developed early on in 2020 the simulation guidelines and best practices for nurse practitioner programs. And so this was an evidence-based practice guidelines that dovetailed really closely with the Enaxel healthcare standards. We added some things that weren't in the standards that we thought were really important, but it was set up like a guideline. So helpful and wonderful, and very proud of that work. We held webinars about best practices in simulation. We presented at conferences. But the problem becomes that you're only reaching the people who are sitting in front of you when you're doing webinars and presentations, and you're not getting a more global introduction to your material. And what we really found as time was going along is that we were missing that key link, which was a truly user-friendly how-to book. We had lots of guidelines, but the real question is how do you go from having an idea of what you want to do and end up creating, implementing, and evaluating a simulation, particularly ones that are scaffolded neatly into the curriculum. So that's that charge. We took the charge that Mary just explained and made that decision to really create a user-friendly book.
That's great. So let me ask you this. Why do you see this as a big need within the NP education community?
Well, I think just as Carla mentioned, there hasn't been a lot of research done with graduate NP simulations. There is much more undergraduate simulation, but not a lot of research devoted to simulation in graduate programs. And I think that helping faculty understand what are the important steps to designing, implementing, and evaluating simulations may help all NP faculty to start to publish their outcomes, which then I think would advance the science of simulation. And our book actually goes over each one of the steps for case design in simulation, starting out with how to develop a case design, then conducting a needs assessment, creating objectives and expected outcomes. The next step is using learning theories to guide simulation. And then step 5 is choosing the appropriate fidelity. Step 6 is designing a simulation-based experience. Step 7 is to develop a pre-briefing plan. Step 8 is to develop a debriefing plan. Step 9 is to develop an evaluation plan. And then we also have chapters devoted to creating a virtual simulation and pilot testing those simulation experiences. And then lastly, we do have an exemplar to actually illustrate how we put all those steps together. Mm-hmm. And Carla, I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about what you wrote related to developing a simulation design team.
Oh, absolutely. So the case design is chapter 1. It's an introduction in case design. But there's so many pieces. Mary just gave you the chapters that are in the book, but there's these other pieces and components that are really important that we wanted to include. And so Mary just alluded to this idea of having a simulation design team. Because often what happens in nurse practitioner education is you have a nurse practitioner faculty, a content expert, and let's just say it's someone who knows depression very well, maybe a psych mental health nurse practitioner, and she wants to create a sim. And so she sits down to the best of her abilities and she or he thinks about how this simulation should look. But what's missing there is that expertise on the how, the why, and the what of creating a high quality from a pedagogical standpoint simulation. That's an art just as well as caring for a patient with depression. And you need to have both of those. And you also need to have on that team. So you need a content expert, you need a simulation expert. And the other part that nurse practitioner simulations often has is a simulated patient. You need to have, it really helps to have a simulation patient representative on your simulation design team because they're looking at it from the angle of the person who is playing the role. And you really want whatever the role is to be at this most believable, authentic quality. And they also know the questions that are often asked during a simulated case. So having their expertise is there. And the fourth part of the party is actually someone from the operational side to really think through how the simulation needs to be run. So when you put all of those together and you have each of those people participating in the development of a simulation, you're really getting to that high level, high quality simulation.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. I think that, it's important to think about simulations as being rigorous, right? We've moved beyond just running a simulation, and we're really focusing on the reliability and validity of a simulation as a learning experience for our students. So I think this ebook it's important because it is really set up around the accreditation standards, safety, all of those things that are really more in the literature now in simulation. So I think that's a really valid point.
I think too, there's a lot of value in NP faculty, especially who are maybe new to simulation, and understanding how helpful and important it is to have a team. I think it's really tempting when you're first starting to try to be everything. And that's probably not going to that's not going to go over well. And I think you're also going to forget things. You're not going to know certain things that do need to be included. So that value of having that strong team behind you, I think is really beneficial.
I think that's absolutely key as you're going through. And I'll just make a couple of other statements about the case design chapter, because it introduces each of the upcoming chapters and links out to those chapters. And there's a couple of other areas that we have in there in that case design that are not as clearly laid out. And so the case design chapter is a really good first start because it gives you a broad overview of what's going to happen during the different steps as we're going through.
And I think the way the ebook is laid out, right, it was very purposeful so that you as faculty could start at the beginning. You can jump around. I mean, that's the nature of having an ebook versus, a paper handbook on your desk, is that ability to toggle back and forth to concepts and ideas. And so can you speak a little bit, though, about, because there's a range of faculty. We know this in working with faculty across the country, is that there's still many novice faculty out there. And then there's some that are very much entrenched in the literature and the evidence and simulation. So how could this ebook be used by both of those kind of different types of faculty?
Well, I think the book was designed in mind for both those novice faculty who are just starting to implement simulations in their programs, and for faculty who have been conducting simulations for a long period of time and may actually want to ensure that their simulations are rigorous and sound so that we can assess and measure the student competencies. I think that's most important. So I think the publication of this book is ideal, and it sort of links with the ushering in of the AAC Essentials and that new educational framework where it's about making sure or ensuring that our students are competent and ready to practice when they graduate from the program. So I just think it's a perfect alignment at this point.
Well, and I'm going to, in addition to what Mary said, make a little plug for the evaluation chapter, which hopefully you'll be hearing about later. But that was also written during the time that the new competencies, well, they all were, when the new essentials, were coming out. And we added in a section about linking competencies to behaviors. And so really trying to keep current and make those recommendations that will help our faculty as they're entering into this new phase of competency-based education and competency-based assessment.
I think that will be a common theme in the ebook. We all are probably knee deep in working with the essentials right now in our various programs. So I think you'll hear that word come out a fair amount during this podcast series. So thank you. Yeah.
Could you both speak about some maybe upcoming events where people who are interested in the ebook could learn a little bit more about the ebook as well as simulation?
Well, sure. This next NONPF 50th annual conference, the Simulation Committee will actually be having a pre-conference. And the pre-conference is designed to help, again, novice faculty to experienced faculty implement scientifically sound simulations, particularly, again, so that we as faculty can start to publish on our simulations and learn from each other and advance the science of simulation. So we're looking forward to that. Stay tuned. I know it will be very creative and cutting edge.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any last minute, parting words about how to use the book? Anything for our readers to know more about?
Well, I know it sounds corny, but I like what Carla said about developing a design team, because in my experience, designing, implementing, and evaluating simulations takes a village. And I think the more help you have, the more collaboration you have, the better the simulation. So I think that is such an important piece of this particular book.
And I'm just going to add on to that, everything that you just said, but it's also so much more fun to do it with a group of people. I mean, literally fun and creative. I always picture our team sitting around a whiteboard, and I'm a whiteboard fan, and just blocking ideas up and what do we need to do. And anyway, I've always found working with the team so much more fun than feeling all that weight and pressure of creation all on your own. So fun.
I'm going to leave it right there with that, because that's a great way to end this first podcast in our series. So I just want to say thank you so much to Carla and Mary for joining Jeannie and I today. It's just been a wonderful conversation and dialogue, and we look forward to hearing the rest of the podcast in this series. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you very much. It was very enjoyable.
Thank you for joining us today to hear from our NONPF simulation experts. This podcast has been written, directed, and produced by David House, Jeannie O'Rourke, Elaine Kauschinger, Tedra Smith, Jeannie Rodriquez, Leanne Barfield, and Queen Henry-Okafor. Special thanks to NONPF CEO Mary Beth Bigley. The digital ebook is available for purchase on the NONPF website to both members and non-members. The opinions expressed in this podcast series or any product mentioned are not specifically endorsed by NONPF.